Welcome to Buckle Up, an ultra running podcast with your hosts, Simon and Brian. Hey, Brian.
Hi,
How are your
Simon. How
knees,
are you?
Brian? I'm good, good. You?
My knees are good. I'm feeling pretty good. I've got a big week ahead of running, so I'm pretty rested. You just did 4x4 by 48, or actually 52, if I'm not mistaken. How did that go for you, Simon?
I did the Goggin challenge. That's right. I carried my boat all the way, and I'm racing this weekend. My knees are okay-ish. We'll see after the weekend, though. Antelope Canyon, 100 miles. It's going to be fun. Brian, really excited today. We have a great guest. We have Chad Higgins. Hey, Chad. How are you?
Oh, good. It's so awesome to be here on your world famous podcast. So thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So, for those not familiar with Chad, so Chad has a great YouTube channel. That's where I know him from. The channel is called See Chad Run. It's a channel with a lot of trail adventure, gear review, ultra running. And what really kind of made me fall in love with the channel, it's a mid-sized channel where you just have pure authenticity there. It's a guy having fun, always smiling, low key, but having great adventure in Colorado, and also clearly an average person doing incredible things. He has a family, he's clearly busy in his day-to-day life, but he's taking the time to go out there. Some of his racing experience, he's done Quad Rock 50. He's done Never Summer 100K, which I've heard many, many good things about. I'm curious to hear. Devil in the Divide 50K. And now preparing for his first 100-mile. I'm not sure how to say it, UT or UTE, or do you know that actually?
I just say UTE 100. Yeah,
UTE 100.
I thought it was Ute.
but I think it's pronounced Ute. Yeah, which is interesting because that race, there's the Ute Mountain Range right next to the where we actually run on the race. But regardless, it should be I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be awesome. We'll talk more about it here in a moment. But
Well, or right now,
sure.
And
Uh,
oh yeah, the last thing I would say is like one of the things that is awesome with Chad is always laughing. And I think one of the video, it might have been Never Summer, but you finished the race, and we've all had that experience. You finish the race, you're probably close to puking, wanting to die, and then his daughter comes like, "Daddy, Daddy, here the banana, eat it now!" And it's super cute. I was like, you don't want to say no, but at the same time, it's tough.
Yeah, that was Quad Rock 50. So 50 mile in Fort Collins. It's an awesome race, 10,000 feet of vert. You do a 25-mile kind of loop. You go up the mountain in different spots, 3 different spots, do this loop, and then you do it backwards in reverse. So it's kind of a cool format in that respect for the 50-mile version. But yeah, at the end, I mean, I was so tired by the end of that, the last couple miles. Like I could hardly run. I just wanted to be done. It was a great experience though, and I would totally do it again. And you're right. Right at the end, my family was there, which was awesome to see. And my littlest, I think she was 7 at the time, still at that time. She may have been 6, so turning 7 soon. But anyways, and she, yeah, had this banana. It's like that's what Dad needs at the end of his race is a banana. So she had it in hand and was, here you go, Dad. It was awesome.
And you have to eat it. That's
I did, yeah. And then I
that's a
tried to
good
eat a
crew
hamburger,
there.
but my hunger hadn't quite come back. It took about 24 hours, and then I was eating all the things.
I could relate, Chad. I once crossed the finish line, and my youngest had missed me, and she wanted me to carry her, and
Oh gosh.
it was pretty challenging. Yeah, she's like just like wanted me to pick her up and hold her for a bit, and it was challenging. Of course, I did it, but I,
Good for you. Yeah. Yeah, I
it was
had
a
the
long
4
day.
kids and they all ran across the finish line with me, which they were looking forward to. It was fun. I was texting them like, I'm almost there. And then it was like, what took you so long, Dad? And I was like, I was tired.
Whoa, whoa.
Man,
Hard
harsh.
love from the crew
Rough
there.
crowd. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big family, Chad. Congrats. What is the age range of your kids?
Yeah, so my youngest is 7. Well, let me start with the oldest actually. So my only boy, my favorite son, he's going to be 15 in July, so coming up. Yeah, I tease him. He's my favorite son. And then my favorite eldest daughter, she is going to be 12 soon, pretty soon here. And then I've got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, both daughters as well. So 3 little princesses. Yep, and a prince.
Congrats.
I find that super impressive myself. I race a lot and work a lot, but I say my secret is I don't have kids yet, and that makes a huge difference when it comes to traveling for races or anything. We're leaving tomorrow evening for Antelope, and we don't have to think about it. We're just going to drive as far as we can, sleep in the car somewhere and whatever.
Yeah.
But you need to plan ahead with these things.
No,
Very
it definitely
impressive.
impacts like what races I'm going to choose to do. Because anything that's, well, I mean, any race you're taking time away from the family, and then if it's something you're traveling to, that's even more time away. A weekend that you're sacrificing or whatever, days that you're in time away from the family, helping your wife or whatever it might be. Um, and then even just training.
Mhm.
It's like I got to find the time if I'm going to train. And personally, I don't necessarily train. Like I'm happy training. I love just running. But of course, as I get closer to some of these bigger races, like a 100-mile race that might be coming up, right? Like I need to be more strategic in the amount of training I'm putting in if I'm going to be prepared. And the more prepared I am, the better experience I'm going to have. And so, yeah, I got to plan that out and get it done. So that's where motivation is nice, but discipline's more important than motivation in some of those instances, for sure.
Chad, I mean, I don't know if it gets any easier. I mean, I'll give you a history of myself. I have two kids. I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old daughter. So they're split in yours, I guess. I'm kind of in the middle of the same age group that you have in your house.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it got any easier. I don't know if it was easier when they were littler. I don't know if it's easier now that they can sort of feed themselves a little bit. But we're just playing more sports and all those things. How are you
Yeah, it's
creating
just
this
different,
time to get
right?
this training in? How are you getting this training in though? Like how does that working
Yeah.
for you?
So I'll back up a little bit. When I first started, or when I first decided to start running, now I'd always kind of run a little bit off and on throughout my whole life. Uh, I ran track in high school, so I knew I enjoyed running, but I didn't understand long distance running. I was a sprinter, right? So anything more than a lap around the track was considered long distance for me. And I remember marveling at these, cross country runners who were doing 5Ks all the time. I was like, man, how can they do that? That's so far. um, you know, and then now that, well, this was 5 years ago or so, I'm in my 30s, right? And it's like, oh man, I've got a little bit of a dad bod. Like, I better do something about this. So I started running. I decided I was going to start running. And it's funny because at the time I woke up, I think it was like 6:15 or something like that in the morning, and knew that if my run didn't happen in the morning, it likely
Mhm.
wasn't going to happen. So I sacrificed a little bit of extra sleep, get 30 minutes or whatever it was at a time of running in the morning. And then I'd help with the girls get ready or whatever, go to work, do my day job. After that, it was like you come home, it's dinner time, help with dinner, help with the kids' homework, get kids in bed. And then everything's finally settled down. It's like, well, now I want to spend time with my wife. So we would watch a show or whatever, and then it's time for bed. So I knew very early on that if I didn't run in the morning, for my schedule at least, if I didn't run in the morning, it wasn't going to happen. So I start running. It's funny because at the time I figured, oh, if I just start running 2 to 3 miles, maybe 3 times a week, like that'd be a pretty good place to be. And it is in its own right, right? And then I remember the first time I ran a 5K distance, you get like the alert on Strava. It's like on Strava and it's all, congratulations, your first 5K or whatever. And it's like, oh, that's really cool. Like I thought that was really neat. And then it got me thinking, how much further can I go? You know? So a few weeks later, I set out on a run, and I just decided to just run, right? And I got to 9 miles, and I thought that was pretty amazing. And then my knees hurt, and my quads were sore, and my calves were sore. And then a week later, I was like, well, how much further can I go? So I did 14 miles and probably overdid it a little bit at the time. And it's funny because now it's like, oh, that's just like a regular run. I thought that was pretty cool. But anyway, circling back, if I don't run in the morning, it doesn't happen. So as my runs were getting longer, as the weeks went on, and I started to really enjoy running, and I started to fall in love with the way it was making me feel and the time that it gave me to just think. And I genuinely fell in love with running, right? So then I started waking up at 6 o'clock, and then 5:45, and then 5:30. I got to 5 a.m. and my wife was like, you cannot wake up any earlier. She was drawing the line, like, no more. You're crazy. So now I wake up at 5. I run for an hour and a half to 2 hours typically in the morning. It kind of depends on the day and what's going on, and when I have to be back at the house, because I do have to be back in time to take my son to an early morning seminary church class. Even on the weekend, like Saturday, if I'm going to do a long run, a 20-mile run or whatever, I still try to be back at the house around 8 o'clock, because that's when the girls are and the kids are wanting to start breakfast, and my wife wants help. We've got things to do, band to get ready for, or chores, or family dinner or whatever it might be, right? So I'm always getting up in the early mornings. And over the years, I've slowly started to maybe wake up a little earlier when I know I'm going to be driving 15 minutes to the trails over the Saturday long run. It's like I know I want some more time, so I'm going to wake up at 4:30 and get out even earlier. Which in the winter is hard because it's dark most of the time. It's a little easier in the
True.
summer.
That's that's cold for Colorado winters, I know for sure. And Fort Collins, you got
Yeah.
wind, and gosh, I know it's
Well, it's
cold
quite
at
a bit
4 o'clock in
different
the
in the
morning.
winter here too, because uh, before the sun comes up, it can be quite a bit colder, or even the same theoretical temperature versus in the day when the sun's out. But because the sun's out, like it makes a big difference, right? And so in the mornings, yeah, there's some chilly mornings for sure. Yeah, and I've got a treadmill, but I really prefer to go outside. I really do.
Yeah,
Do you
for
have a
sure.
limit of how cold it'll be before you decide not to go out?
Me, I live in San Diego right
I was
now,
just gonna.
okay? So
I was
like
gonna
50
say.
degrees is
50
about
degrees.
as cold as I
Yeah.
go. Yeah. I used to be
What's
from the
what's
Northeast, so I used to
what's
be
your
good,
temperature?
but
What's your temp? What's your temp, Simon? What's your range?
I think 60 is getting chilly.
Oh gosh, that would be like t-shirt and
Yeah.
shorts. Yeah, for
That
sure.
wasn't even the high today. That wasn't even the high today.
And it's miserable. Poor you guys. I feel sorry for you. No, I'm joking. I'm totally fine with the cold. If anything, I prefer
Yeah.
the cold to the heat, which definitely made bad water not great for that, but that's a whole different story.
I don't know if I have a temperature range. The same thing. If life gets in the way, I will use a treadmill as well. But I don't have a range. I mean, even as cold as I think my location will change. Like a negative number will put me on the ski resort on snowshoes, and I'm just not going to deal with the ice and
Mm.
the lack of grip or traction on the sidewalks and or roads. I'll just commit to going to the trail and using snowshoes. So
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
what
that
is
makes
tough
sense.
for me is like racing in the cold can be okay, but when you're in the middle of the night, you're wet and you're at the aid station and you have to go out, that's where I start being kind of lazy a little bit. And I'm like, I'm just gonna sit here a little longer to get a little warmer because like I get not scared, but worried that whatever, I'm not able to run anymore. I'm not able to warm up anymore. And even though it's not crazy cold, it's freezing and I don't really have so many layers. So I get kind of worried about it for whatever reason. I really don't like that.
Well, and deep into a race too, like you're less able to stay warm because your body's just tired, right? So
Yeah, exactly. It's usually you would say, well, if I get cold, I'm just gonna run a little faster. But then it's like, well, so here's the thing, I can barely stay awake right now. So let's see what happens. So
I've had some pretty cold overnights in events as a pacer and participant, and there is a little bit of a risk involved. I mean, not even a little bit, quite a bit of a risk, quite honestly. Like 20 degrees isn't for me in Colorado isn't that cold. Of course, it's below freezing, but it's cold enough that you can't like lay down and take a nap on a tree. You can't get that 15-minute cat
yeah,
nap
if you
because
stop,
you get
you're
too
gonna get
cold.
cold.
Yeah, everything starts to freeze up. Even your blood flow slows down. Just way too much, though. You're kind of committed to waiting for the sun to come up and move forward,
yeah.
and that unfortunately means moving slower or less efficiently.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I've definitely felt where you're sweating, your feet are wet or whatever if you're running in the snow, whatever it may be, and you can endure that pretty easily if it's fresh. If you're fresh, early in a run for 3, even 4 or 5 hours. But yeah, at the end of a long day, it's like that sounds less fun.
Yeah, and you see the contrast so well. Like in 100 mile, if you start before sunrise, you go, you're in t-shirt, like that was fine. I didn't need anything. Same temperature in the evening, you're with your puffy and your hat and
Mm-hmm.
you're shaking. You're like, I need ramen noodle right now. It's a huge difference.
When you
And
ran
it
Jackpot,
happened like this.
was there
Jackpot
much of a
was,
temperature swing in Jackpot?
yeah, I mean, it got hot when it was sunny during the day, but just for a short while. And then very quickly, it kind of got cold. Not crazy cold. I'm actually more worried this weekend at Antelope Canyon. That's probably the coldest I've ever felt in a race. And it must have been like 20, 25, so not crazy cold. But so I'm cheap, guys. And I was flying there. I didn't have even I didn't have a check-in luggage, but I didn't even have a cabin luggage. I just had like my personal item, which was a small backpack. So all the clothing I had brought, I was wearing them, and I was clearly not enough.
It was all
And
stuffed in your 12-liter Solomon
yeah,
vest or
yeah, in
something.
my Salomon vest, yeah, exactly. And but like more serious, like it was a small bag. It was bigger than that, but very small. And I was like, this is not enough. And the way it is, this race is it's at the end it's 10-mile loops around the town, which is kind of boring, but that's another thing. And you have an aid station after 5 miles, and you come back to the other one. And I was like, I am not stopping at that 5-1. Otherwise, like every time I stopped, I was kind of sitting down waiting 30 minutes, and then like everything just gets so tense because you're cold. But I would go out there, be good for 1 or 2 miles, and then I would start kind of like shaking a little bit. So I was probably close to hypothermia, which is not
Wow.
great. Yeah. And actually that led to a lot of DNF. I think we had like 70% DNF for a race that on paper is like pretty easy. So it's gonna be fun
That's
this
pretty
weekend.
significant, yeah. That's
Yeah.
pretty
That's huge.
significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where is this race?
Antelope? It's in Antelope Canyon, Page, Arizona. So it's kind of northeast, I guess, in Arizona. It's pretty. For the first 40 miles are really beautiful. You run in these slot canyon. If you don't know Antelope Canyon, like just Google it, and the image you'll see, you'll say, oh yeah, I've seen that as a screenshot, like on my
Yeah.
computer. Horseshoe Bend also is really nice, but yeah, the last 60 miles, like eh. So Nora is running the 50-mile, and our friend Brian, our friend Fanny, is running the 50-mile also. So
Oh,
they're
cool.
both,
Cool,
yeah,
cool.
they're both smarter than me, which is good.
Does the 50 and the 100 start at the same time or different times?
I didn't check for this time, but last time was weird. The 50-mile we're starting first, and then the 100-mile. And usually it's the opposite. Usually the 100-mile go first because we're slower. I don't know why they do it like that. I think it's probably to control when we're in the Antelope Canyon area, so that not everyone is at the same time or something like that. But I'll try to catch up to them. Like I can run too fast as needed, and then I'll slow down later and say that was pretty stupid. So, but I actually, Chad, I was really interested about your training regimen, and the way you describe it, I think is interesting because if you're a pro runner, it's interesting what you hear pro or people that are very dedicated and deep into the sport say like, oh, like do this like small 30-minute routine every day and do this thing and do this thing. It's like, look, dude, like that's great. I'm sure it's helpful, but like time is money, and I don't have that kind of time. And you become very good at prioritizing things, but there's definitely, it's not just physical, it's a time management thing. And from you found the way to get some time. So I'm curious how you prioritize your workout. If you just go running, how did you build your training block, let's say before Never Summer? Was Never Summer your last race, or was it Squad Rock?
Never Summer was that was the 100K that I did in July last year.
Yeah.
I actually did another one in September, which was the Devil on the Divide 50K.
Okay.
Both awesome races, have their unique challenges. Never Summer is definitely the bigger, harder race, though. Yeah, and it'll be interesting, and I'll share my experience about that. But it'll be interesting to kind of compare that with maybe what you guys can tell me from your experience
Sure.
running 100-milers, as I prepare, for my first 100-mile race this year in later in August. So with Never Summer, and just in general, I guess as far as training goes, yeah, it's like I have to prioritize when I'm going to run. I already know really ahead of time, like how much time I'm going to have based on when I think I'm going to wake up. I'll be honest, sometimes, maybe I hit the snooze button. I try not to do that. Occasionally I do sleep in and I miss a day. Usually that's because there's just, life, right? More
Yeah.
stressors. I'm more tired for some reason. And I have to offer a little bit of forgiveness because that just happens, right? Life happens, work, family, maybe the training load, who knows, right? And so offer yourself a little bit of forgiveness if you miss a day. It's not the end of the world, and you just pick up tomorrow and you keep going.
Yeah. I mean,
And
if
just
I
try to
could
enjoy
just
it.
like on a tangent here, like I totally agree with that. I think there's a lot of people that are really tough guys, like no excuse, like that's great, but that's kind of silly. Like you have to be realistic about what you do. And I think
Yeah.
there's a huge difference between taking a day off or slowing down on training for good reason and just finding excuse all the time. And it's totally different. Like I had
Yeah.
blocks where like I barely train. And it's like, well, your work got crazy. Like I work 100 hours this week. Like, where do you want me to run? Like that, my work is more important than running right now. It's not finding an excuse. But if I had the time, I would go. And like that's harder to
Yeah.
do, to know when not to go for the good reason. And I think that's great that you're doing that.
When you really have to listen to your body, and
Mm.
you know that experience comes in time. But yeah, Brian, what were you going to
The
say?
three of us in this little chat here are not making any money by running. We're just not getting paid for it, right? So we have to have other means to get to pay to run. Basically, we have to buy the shoes, we have to buy the backpacks, we have to pay the entries, we have to travel there. All those things, cost money, and it's in addition to the mortgages and the kids' clothing and all the other things, food on the table, right? And so, the priority isn't it just for us mid packers. It just can't be running. Like it has to be life, and it has to be
Yeah.
enjoyable. I mean, I think there has to be, you have to
Yeah.
have found joy in running and the process of training. As much as I love racing and crossing the finish line with my kids, if that's the case in any particular race, I also enjoy just the process of training fairly regularly, right? I'm not going to say like, dedicated processes and all these things. When I get it done, I get it done, and I enjoy the process.
Well, if it's just to have your kids run across the finish line at the end, like, well, then just do a bunch of 5Ks or something.
I was going to
those,
say, there's way
those are
shorter
cheaper.
races to do. Yeah, way shorter.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up an interesting thought about like why we run. Like, and I think
Hmm.
for us and hopefully for a lot of people, it's more of an intrinsic reason, motivator there, that gets us out the door. Um, Gets us to do the training. I would even argue for a lot of, at least for us, hopefully for a lot of people, it's not just for the races. I think that there is an enjoyable component, and I enjoy races, but I like you, Brian, what you were saying. I love just training and getting out and moving on my 2 feet and exploring. Running for me is gratitude in motion. It's just a way of expressing, like, I'm
Mm.
grateful for my body, what it can do, like what my legs can take, where they can take me, what I'm able to see, and not just physically. Like we mentioned it earlier, mentally, emotionally. Like I get a lot of good mental self time, inspiration, ideas. It allows me time to kind of organize my thoughts, and I come back from the end of a run usually pretty clear headed, and it helps me with work and family and time management. Just forces me to maybe be a little more responsible and in some cases creative. I mean, there's just all those benefits, right? Health benefits, mental, physical, and so on.
Yeah.
I want to come back to the training aspect
Yeah. Yeah.
for Never Summer. So a little bit about this race. Never Summer 100K. Last year they had to add on a little tiny extension, so they added about a mile or so um, to go around a piece of property. So it ended up being actually about 65 miles. My watch clocked in about 66 miles, so just a little bit more than 100K. It took me 18 hours, just over 18 hours to finish this race. 14,000 feet of vert. Um, there were about 300 people that ran the race, and 94 of them, I think was the number, DNF'd. So they either ran out of time, they gave up. So about a third of the people who signed up and presumably planned to finish this race,
Mm.
had to drop for whatever reason. And I finished 50th place out of the remaining 200 that actually also finished. So that's not bad. I don't know where that puts me, as maybe the front-ish of the middle of the pack. I don't know. But 18 hours, yeah. Which and in contrast, I had a friend who ran it, and I got a funny story about this too. But he finished about an hour and a half ahead of me in 25th place. Kind of gives you the range there. But anyways, and I think you have like 24 hours to finish
Mm.
this race or something like that. And I don't remember what the cutoff was, but it's a pretty difficult race. And it was the first time that I had ran a race where I started with the sun just barely coming up over the mountains, and then later, 12 hours later, the sun's setting, and I'm still running, which was interesting because, a couple hours into the night, it was about 10 o'clock, I think. My biological clock was like, "Hey, it's time for bed. You're really tired." was like, man, I need to wake up. Where's my caffeinated gel?
Yeah.
What's going on here? So that was an interesting experience. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of compares into my 100 miler, knowing that I'll be running. Maybe it'll be different just knowing that I'll be running all through the night. I don't know. Fingers crossed. I'll stay awake.
Yeah.
I think that 18
Um,
hour experience is the perfect training. I think
Yeah,
Simon's going to allude to that as well. I mean, it's those experiences that build on themselves, I'm not going to say the nighttime for your 100 miler at Utte's going to be easy by any means, but it's going to be slightly easier because of the experiences you had at that
absolutely.
event.
yeah, totally. I think before you do it, a lot of people are worried about running at night, and then when you do it, at least for me, I was like, oh, like that's okay. Like that, I'm more likely to trip, for example, in daytime, and I know I'm not gonna be attacked by a bear, and like it's fine, really. But the 50 mile between 50 mile and 100K for me, that's the difference. Like 50 mile, yeah, I'll probably finish before sunset. If not, like I know it's almost done. 100K, especially if it's in the mountains, it's not almost done. There's a whole lot left. And if you do 2, 3, 4, 5 hours into the night, it's the same as doing the full night, except that you don't get that kind of cool feeling of like, oh, the sun is rising, like it's getting warmer, and like you think about little things like, oh, like I need I need a porta potty. My body knows it's the morning and I need sunscreen. The little things that are like, hey, I'm still alive and I kind of made it through.
Yeah.
But that's great. Have you ever heard of a race called the Tusher 100K in Utah?
Heard of it. Yeah, I don't know the stats on it, but definitely have heard of it.
I feel it would be, if you like Never Summer, I feel it's a race that would kind of be in the same vein, a little bit of like a lot of elevation, gorgeous views, like a
Yeah.
rough 100K. Because the way you described it was exactly my experience too. And I think I probably did also 18 hours or something like that. I think it was
Yeah.
my first kind of experience into the night, and I was like, oh,
And
that's
Never
interesting.
Summer is at elevation too. I mean, I don't remember what you start out at, but you're at 10, 11, 12, 13,000 feet,
Yeah.
you know, at
I'm I
range.
might be reading I might be reading into this, Chad, but I noticed from your running resume that you're staying pretty close to home. Is that due to
Yeah.
family life and all those things? And if
Yeah, it
so, I
really
can
is for
totally
the
relate.
travel.
Yeah, totally. I
Yeah,
can
because like
relate, and I've done the same things. I've done like a ton of Leadvilles, and I've done Moab, and I'm on the western side of Colorado, and I'm splitting the difference. I'm not really venturing off too far.
yeah, and a good example is like the Quad Rock 50. I mean, that
Mhm.
was a 15-minute drive, which was pretty cool. So I drove there, I ran the race, and then I drove home with, let's see here, with Never Summer, drove there, stayed the night, camped, tent camped,
Mhm.
ran the race, and then it was weird. I was really tired, but I wasn't ready to sleep yet,
Mhm.
which
Hmm.
was really weird. So I kind of like just threw everything in the car. Like I didn't even fold my tent up. I just kind of wadded it up and threw it in the back of the car, and I drove home. And it was like a 2-hour drive. And it was about an hour into that drive where my body was like, "Okay, now you're tired." I was like, "No, I got to stay awake. I got to get home." So I stumble in at 1 or 2 a.m. or whatever time it was. I don't remember now, but
Totally.
it's probably about 2 a.m. I'm dirty. I have to shower real quick, go to sleep. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You never
I
know how
wouldn't
your
trade the
body's
experience.
reacting after these races. Like for me, it's not always the same. So sometimes I'm totally fine. I'd say the most common for me is I'm exhausted and super tired, but not sleepy. So it's closer to passing out than sleeping. And then my legs will cramp up, and then I'll just be waking up every like 2 minutes, and I need to move, and like no position is comfortable for more than 30 seconds. But I've also
Hmm.
done, driving immediately after going to the airport, sitting in a plane and be like, hey, I feel pretty good. And and then trying to get out of the plane, I'm like, actually, I don't feel
Mhm.
good right now. This is really bad. And like being really locked. So yeah, it's always a
Years ago,
surprise.
my first ultra, I got a funny story. I was driving back. Actually, it wasn't even an ultra. It was Ironman Coeur d'Alene in 2005. And Katie and I were driving back, finished the event, literally jumped in the van, and we're driving back to Colorado. And I drove, I don't know, 3, 4 hours, essentially a tank of gas. Tried to get out at the gas station to pump gas into the car. And she looked out the mirror, and I was still in the seated position, pumping gas into the van. Like I couldn't upright stand. I was still in the squatting position because I couldn't even get my body to stand up straight. And basically using the gas handle to like keep me upright next to the vehicle.
Yeah.
That's funny. I'll pop a couple ibuprofen after the end of a race, knowing that I'll be in the car for an hour, 2 or 3, or whatever,
Yeah.
just to help keep things a little loose.
Yeah. I think what's
Oh,
insane, and I don't know if it's your experience also, but it's we feel like okay to cross the like it's painful to cross the finish line, but you're kind of still moving. Then you stop, then you can barely walk all of a sudden. Then you're in super pain for a few days, and then it's like, huh? Like unless you're like when I have like tendonitis or something, that's a different story. But when I'm good, like 2 or 3 days, I'm like, hey, that's not so bad actually. Like I thought I was dying, but I'm okay. It happens pretty suddenly for me, like 2 or 3 days, and I'm like, it's fine. Let's sign up for a new race. And then that's when you do a mistake, and then you sign up for a new race. But yeah,
you forget about the discomfort and the pain.
yep,
So
yep.
Chad, I want to go back to the fact that that my observation was basically spot on, that you're staying pretty close to home.
Yeah.
And I get it. I fully understand it. I'm in the same boat, and I rarely venture too far away from my house these days to race. But you are going to the Ute 100 in September. It has 21,000, or no, late August. I'm sorry. It has 21,000 vertical feet. And it's in the LaSalle's. It's in Moab. So do you have a plan for that? What does that look like for you for traveling? Do you have a
Yeah.
crew? Because also, I don't know if you had a pacer or anything, or a crew for the 100K.
No, I didn't
So what
have
does
a
that kind of look
crew.
for you? Yeah.
Yeah, well, for the 100K for Never Summer, we had the drop bag at mile 30 or whatever, and that's all I really had. I had some new gels and hydration ready in there, and just swapped things out, and then kept going. But no crew or anything like that. For UTE 100, I don't know if I'll have pacers or not. There's a chance that my family, who lives in Utah, Salt Lake area, may come down, and if they do, one of my brothers, I have a couple brothers that are runners, and so maybe they'll have an opportunity to join me. I'm mostly concerned about the night section. It's like I know I can get through the day, like that's fine, but it'd be nice to have somebody there with me during the night section, just someone to talk to, be there with me, even if we don't talk, whatever it might be, but have someone through part of that night section. So maybe one of my brothers will be able to join me. That'll be a lot of fun. My friend who also ran the Quad Rock, his name's Jason. He may come down and hang out and run part of it with me. I said Quad Rock, I meant Never Summer. It was funny, at Never Summer, he was having some stomach issues around mile 40, and so I didn't see him after mile 35. It was about mile 50, and I'm thinking, I haven't seen Jason. I wonder how he's doing. No kidding, within 2 minutes, he comes up behind me. Hey, Chad, how you doing? Hey, good. He's like, well, I'm feeling great. I'm going to keep going. And then he ended up finishing an hour and a half faster than me. So he rebounded pretty
Bounce
good.
back. Yep.
He's done a couple more hundreds and did really well. I forget which race. It was one of the Era Viper races recently. He ran right behind Jeff Browning
Hmm.
and finished third overall, second place male. So good for him. Anyways,
Maybe
props
cold
to
water.
Jason. Yes, yep, it was.
Hmm.
Yep, cold water.
Impressive.
So anyway,
That's
so I
nice.
get
That's
to
good.
run with him a bunch, and maybe he'll come down and be a pacer as well. So it'd be kind of cool, or do something, hang out down there. So I plan to drive down there, the day before, and I'll camp there that night and run the race, and then maybe camp the next day. I haven't decided how exactly I'm going to get back. I'm planning to drive back. I don't know how I'm going to feel. Maybe I'll have to drive a few hours and stop and stretch and get the massage gun out and take some time on the side of the road or something to loosen up the muscles. But I forget how long the drive is, 6 hours or so. So that I can make that do. So that's my plan.
Yeah,
Drive,
Cool. That
that
race,
sounds
sounds pretty
drive.
cool. That
Yeah.
I mean, it's the thing is, it's the week after Leadville, Brian. I don't know if you noticed that actually. So, like, I have been thinking about this race actually since last year. I didn't know about it, but I have a friend who raced it last summer. He said it was a cool race.
Yeah.
But 1 week after Leadville is kind of,
It's a little close.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little close.
So it's on the it's runs through sections that are the last from mile 200 to the finish line of the Moab 240. There's crossover
Oh,
sections in the
interesting.
LaSalle's there,
Oh.
so I'm really familiar with that area. And I live 3 hours from Moab, and before
nice.
the 200 or the UTE, before the Moab 240 or the UTE 100 were even on the radar, I was mountain biking in those trails, a decade or more ago.
And what do you think of the LaSalles and the trails out there?
I love them. They're a little. I love them. They're a little overgrown. I think I know your terrain as well. I've ran in Lowry State
Lori
Park.
State Park, yeah, up north
Yeah,
here, yeah.
I've ran in. I've actually got lost there and wound up at the wrong parking lot one time. I thought I found my way, and I did to a parking lot, but it was the sign told me I still had 4 more miles to go to the parking lot I was actually needing to get to. But I know the terrain that you run on in those areas, or at least that terrain. And I also, when I lived in Loveland, I used to run Blue Sky. There's Coyote Ridge, and it ties into some other trail
Yeah.
systems in there. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but
Yeah, I
anyway.
run Coyote Ridge all the time. It connects
Okay.
into Blue Sky, Devil's Backbone, Indian
Oh, Devil's
Summer,
Backbone is what I'm
Horsetooth.
thinking of.
Yeah, all those
Indian
trails.
Summer, Devil's Backbone. Yeah.
Yeah.
I lived in the area when they were finishing Devil's Backbone. So 06, I want to say. But in short
nice.
order, the trails in those salves are, a lot of them are old, like motocross trails or like dirt bike trails. There's nothing wrong with them, but they haven't been used in a while, or they're now not allowed to be motorized. So they're foot traffic or horse traffic only. So they're a little overgrown. They're a little more, they're less used than your Fort Collins, Northern Colorado trails. And so they're a little overgrown. They're a little bushy. You're going to have like the scrapes down your arms, and you're going to be parting the bushes and spots to continue down the trail in sections. But otherwise,
Sounds like it'll make a great video.
Yep.
yeah, perfect.
What do you guys have as far as recommendations for training? I mean, my plan, and I'm going to do something similar to what I did for Never Summer, but I'm hoping to do more, well, up my training a little bit more. So right now I'm doing high 40s, low 50s pretty regularly. Naturally, just listening to my body, I find that every third or fourth week, I kind of have a natural dip in my mileage, usually because there's an extra day or two that I end up sleeping in because I'm tired. But again, just trying to listen to my body. So naturally that dip, and then I ramp back up. As I move into summer, my plan is to bring that up into more consistent 60-mile weeks. And then I'd like to, 3-4 weeks before the 100, ramp up ideally into the 70-mile weeks, and mostly adding in double back-to-back long runs, Friday, Saturday type thing. So come in like an hour later to work or whatever it might be, and get 15, 16, 17 miles that day, maybe another 20 miles the next day. Do you think, we can talk more about like what type of tempo runs, speed work I should be doing, maybe hill repeats. I think being more specific in my training as far as the type of terrain might help, but I think just hills is probably going to be pretty beneficial. So getting out on the trails more than the flat roads. So I do plan to do that as well. Does that sound, from your experience, probably just a good bet to set up a pretty solid, successful
Brian, do you
potential
want me to
race?
start and then you can continue with the actual knowledge? Because Brian is a real
Sure.
coach, right? So I talk out of my ass, and like I can say what has worked for me, and then who knows if science is following that. But like what you describe, I think is actually great. First, you're not necessarily overdoing it in kind of your maintenance form. Like there's no point for you to like already be at peak of 70 miles a week. First, there's almost no gain to be had like 6 months in advance. But also we said like it's a time thing. Like spend time with your family, do other things. But yeah, a peak of 60 to 70 is what I aim for. And I try to have a full block of 3 weeks of doing that, then taper, then it's my race. But basically, like just 1 week of 70 feels like it's not enough. But it's the high end. Anything above that for me, I get that super high risk of injuries. And I've done it before, like I was running in the 90s, super high risk of injuries. And also, you probably get a fair amount of vert where you are. So your 70 miles don't mean the same to someone else, like doing like
That's true.
track or whatever. Like it's a huge difference. And then you have to consider time on feet. And then, yeah, mixing up like some tempo and these things or whatever you're going to do high intensity. I would say you have a lot of, from your channel, you have a lot of time on trail, which is like also like great. If you can do your long run doing that, that mimics more what you're going to do in the race, which is great. You already have your food, you're used to that. You have your gear, you're used to that. I think the only thing that I haven't heard you say is doing like some strengthening exercise. If you do, like that's great. If not, I would really consider it. And for me, I've seen that being super beneficial for performance, but also for injury prevention, especially on longer race and especially on race that I will run a lot of downhill. At least personally, that's where I actually will have knee pain or IT band issue, and just knowing that my quads get hammered eventually, then it's your joint having an impact. But yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty solid. All right, Brian, Coach Brian, shoot us with real knowledge now.
So I want to preface this by saying that Simon does have a ton of knowledge, but he also races every month. So he's
True.
just in a taper when he's not racing. I mean, that's basically what Simon does, right?
Tapering, yes, and carb loading.
And carb loading.
Yes.
It's perfect. I should take up that plan. It sounds perfect. I think you're right on the right track, Chad. I think you're building a fine base right now at that constant, steady, giving back time to the family and to other life commitments, because it's going to get busier and tighter, and the window's going to be more narrow. And you do want to start increasing. And I think Simon brought up a good point, is that we're always talking about miles, but miles are so different sometimes. Simon's miles down in San Diego on, I don't know, the seawall trail not on the beach, but on the seawall trail.
It's virtually impossible where I live to not have gain. So on a 10-mile run, I'll probably have 1,500 on average, sadly enough.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah, even if I try not to, that's what's annoying. So if I want to do interval,
my local trails, I'll do Coyote Ridge, right? You know, it's an 11-mile loop that I enjoy doing. I call it Coyote Ridge Wednesday. I just love getting out there. I'll do my long runs often out there too, and I'll get about 19,000 or 100 feet out there.
That's good mile.
I enjoy it.
Where I was going with that is that, we talk about mileage, but I think Simon brings up a good point about seeing if you can convert that to time, and using time as a factor, because time on feet is a little bit, most of the time it's more relevant than distance, because we do climb up and down. If you did 25 miles on, I don't know, the Fort Collins bike path, or the Poudre Canyon Trail, I think it's called, compared to going up into
relatively
Lower State
flat.
Park.
Yeah.
25 miles is going to be completely different. One might take you 6 hours, one might just take you 4 hours. Converting that to time is a good idea. And then chopping up that time. I like the back-to-backs. I like the longer Saturday, a little bit less on Sunday. But it doesn't have to be taxing and killing. I think your body is on a natural rhythm, which sounds really great, that every fourth week you're just sleeping in, getting that extra day, maybe 2 days. And even the load that you're putting on your body in the run could be reduced as well. So instead of going out for that hard tempo run, even on the recovery week, you could just bring it down to just a recovery run as opposed to doing tempo or anything.
And I know a lot of people ask questions about trying to get into the exact science and specifics about when, how should they be running? And I don't know. I run mostly just off of feel. If I feel like I need to do a tempo run because I haven't done one in a little while, then I'll go do that. But a lot of time I try to keep my runs mostly easy. I'll be honest, most of the time it's probably medium easy, like the red zone or the zone 3, whatever. I don't know. I just enjoy getting out and I try to listen to my body. How do I feel right now, in the moment? And if I feel good at the end of a 10-mile run or whatever, and I want to drop it in this 6:30 pace or whatever for the last mile, then I'll do that. But rarely am I, and this is maybe a downfall in some respects, but I probably should do more intervals, tempo runs, a little more often. I think that would really help my speed. But there's an argument maybe to be said that how much do you need to do that for a 100-mile race? I think it has its place, right, for building strength and teaching your body how to process oxygen a little more efficiently.
Yeah.
But those things are a little more taxing on your body too, so you got to recover differently.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, and about exactly that, the why, and like the second part is the one that people don't necessarily realize, but yeah, it's about metabolism and increasing your VO2 max. But like what you're using is like an intuitive training method, which I think that's closer to what I use when I'm just like tapering all the time. When I had a longer block, I was a little bit more structured. And I was about to say, look, I mean, if you want to like finish first at UTMB, maybe you're not doing the right approach. But if you want to maximize having fun, that's probably perfect. And then I'm like, well, at the same time, Courtney does that and she wins UTMB. So you can apparently do both. So don't feel like you're limiting yourself. But people, I think, overstate the amount of science that there are between some recommendations. Sometimes they talk about it like there's this huge clinical study that has clearly demonstrated, and Brian is actually older in the sport than I am. And I was talking with my uncle who was more into cycling, and hearing what they were thinking was the right way to fuel for race, like say like 30 years ago. And it was backed by science. And now you listen to that, it's like, what science was that? That was not science. That was like myth. And I'm sure we're still having the same kind of blind spot of thinking. Like maybe I'm saying like, hey, interval is important for VO2 max, and in 10 years they'll do actual study and say that was bullshit. There was no truth behind that. So
Well,
I also think there's a component to Simon's point about the VO2 max, trying to raise your VO2 max. And I mean, I think that's like the tip of the spear. Like, I mean, I think for the layperson, for the other 95% of the people participating in ultra running, we're not looking at our VO2 max. I don't even know what my VO2 max is. I don't even know if I'm raising it. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to get consistent. I'm trying to run steady. I'm throwing an interval workout in a week. Way early season, I'll throw tempo workouts in the middle of the season, and I'm throwing in steady state a little bit longer intervals as I get closer to the race. I'm trying to do more race specific work as we get closer to the event, and the least specific, the farthest away from the event. And that's just a general rule of thumb. VO2 max applies to that person that is trying to knock minutes off their time, and we have the potential of knocking hours off if we really tried really hard. But we do have a life, and we're trying to make it fun, and we're trying to make it interesting.
Yeah, some of those very specific things, they're kind of the top of that pyramid, right? Yeah, they have their place, and they're going to improve your running for sure. And we ought to do them both physically, but also for mental, reasons. Just to remind ourselves or prove to ourselves that we can run fast, or whatever it might be. And of course, that we mentioned the VO2 max gains, but everything else below that on that pyramid, building that foundation, like that, you just stay consistent doing those things, and you're gonna be a pretty strong runner.
Yeah, and like if we were really trying to optimize things, like I've seen your video, Chad, like you say thanks to Aid Station and these sorts of things, right? And you talk with people. If we were really trying like to maximize, like, no, shut up, like don't say thank you to anyone. You just slide through. And it's like, hey, like I'm also just here to have fun right now. So like,
Yeah.
The perfection, we're not aiming for perfection. And
now, in defense, though, I do say thank you, but I don't try to take too much time. There's been plenty of aid stations that I just run through because, frankly, I don't need any fuel at mile 5 or mile 10 or mile 15. I might need water, but that's about it, right? And I'm just gonna,
sure.
While I'm there, I'll say thank you and like chat with them briefly, but then I'm out.
Yeah. I
and
mean,
I'm
of
still
course,
pushing.
we
So
still try to be efficient, but yeah, I mean, I play
it
with
depends on the
dogs,
length
so
of the race too.
yeah, that's true. And it's better to take your time early than regret not taking it. But yeah, and I appreciate Brian's take also on like the interval versus, because for me it's all synonyms. Like it's speed work, and Brian has definitely a more, he has the knowledge to do these things. For me, and like pure interval, especially the shorter one, it's scary a little bit because that's where you get injured. That's where you pull something because you were going, especially I do some on my treadmill. That's the easiest because of the hill around here. And that's where you just like, you push too hard and you pull something and then you're out. So that like kind of, you say like spear, like the point of the spear, it's great. But if you're like you're offline from running for 6 weeks because of that, was it really worth it? And it's like, maybe not.
I will say one of the times that I felt the fastest was when I started doing a lot of Strava segment hunting. Looking on your phone, like whose times can I beat? I can run that. I can beat that one. But I started doing that a bunch. Man,
I don't
got
think they're
fast.
real anymore these times. Like especially around me, like cycling. I'm 100%
Oh my
sure. Like
gosh.
people are on motorcycles, like they go 50 mile an hour on an uphill. I'm like, I don't think so, dude. Like I really don't think so.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
running is maybe safer, but definitely
I just
not
got
biking.
two local legends taken from me this week by the same guy, and I'm like, oh man, now I got to go run that route like 3 more times next week just to get it all back.
Yeah.
Hey, Chad.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about See Chad Run. How did that come about? How did you get there? What was the thought process? What's the need? And What's it all about?
So I started my channel, See Chad Run, on YouTube, about 4 years ago. And it was where I was starting to get into running, starting to enjoy it. So I started watching more videos about it, trail running and these races. And then I started getting into the gear reviews and was like, oh, that's really cool. Like maybe I could do something like that. And at the time I was like, oh man, if only I had done this like 5 years ago or a year ago, whatever it was. And I had to stop myself, right? And remind myself that like, no, yeah, okay, maybe I'd be ahead if I did start a few years ago, but really like I don't worry about that. Just start where you're at today and move forward, right? And that's maybe just a good life lesson. But I took that to heart for YouTube and was like, hey, let me just start where I'm at now and just see what I can do with it, right? And so in time, I've learned that there's really three reasons why I want to do YouTube. Simon, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on why you do YouTube. But for me, number one is because I just love running, right? So I just want to just do it because I love it. Um, Number two, I want to inform and maybe inspire other people in some way. So inform through gear reviews or just whatever potential advice that hopefully is good and meaningful that I can share, or just inspire somebody through, my charismatic smile or some race that I did or whatever it might be. Um, and the gratitude that I try to express on my channel and in my videos. And then the third reason that why I do YouTube is because I want it to enable me as a runner. And so I'm not going to lie, like if I can get a little bit of money from YouTube ad revenue or a pair of shoes from a company to do a review, like that enables me as a runner and helps, and help propel me in doing something that I enjoy. Um, so that's why I do YouTube, and I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed growing the channel and just sharing the content, and it's just great fun.
Yeah, I mean,
The videos that I enjoy the most are the trail running ones, and those ones get the least amount of views, but
yeah,
it's just fun to
I
share, and
get the
I don't know.
feeling, man. It's yeah, you're very structured about why you do it. Like for me, where it started, like I was always thinking, yeah, maybe like someday I race so much I should maybe put them together. But it's a lot of work. I think people don't see how much work there is behind putting any movie, even the
There is.
simplest movie. It's time consuming and very quick. It's like, well, should I spend time working, time with my wife, time training, time racing, and then a channel on top of that? So you really have to have a good why. And for me, I think your second one is a big one for me. I was looking at a lot of content online, and sometimes you look for a race, especially smaller one, you just don't have good kind of movies about it. And I'm just curious to like, what's the trail and like these sorts of things. So I started taking a lot of footage about it and just trying to show that. But it turned more into trying to inspire people as much as possible, showing that look, I mean, if a clown like me can do it, like you can do it too, and you don't have to be fast and you don't have to be competitive. And then it's providing information. Now that I have this information, there's so many terribly bad tip video online. I was like, this is not okay. I was like, I'm gonna provide the information that has worked for me, because some people are definitely full of shit, and that is like taking me. And the more you run, the more you notice these. Like you get a tingly feeling like there's something you're not saying, dude. Like that's not clean. So that was for that. And I enjoy the process. I enjoy making movies. There's definitely movies that I prefer making over others. Like I think it's obvious. It's more fun to put a movie together of a run like Black Canyon 100K with my wife. That was a fun adventure. That was so fun to put together. That's something to watch together, and like hey, like that was a fun day. And if I compare to like a movie about how to prevent blisters, like, yeah, I mean, I'm helping people, but it's not nearly as exciting. So then what I do is that I try to be silly and I try to have fun. And like in the blister video, like I time travel, which is like super stupid. And I can see
Well, I love the creativity and like how you do your videos. It's a lot of fun
it,
to
and
watch.
I
So
have fun
anybody who's
putting
not
it. And
who's
like,
listening and not subscribed, go subscribe to
yeah, I mean,
Simon's
yeah. And same with
channel.
See Chad Run. It's like, the Terminator movie, like I know when I was filming it, like not so many people will watch it. And I was like, whatever, like this is just stupid, silly. I'm just gonna put it out there, and next week I'll make a how to
Yeah.
create a training plan video. It's gonna be more serious, but like that's part of the fun. And if I would remove these fun videos, I think it would almost become like work, but barely paid work. And then very quickly I'm like, look, I mean, if it was about the money, I would kind of find a consulting gig or something that I could be paid much, much more. The thing that I have never done, and I'm very seriously considering, and I think because we're going to run out of time very quickly, we were supposed to talk about shoes today with Chad because he knows a lot. And unfortunately, we won't have time. So what you guys should do is go and see Chad run. He has a ton of reviews on shoes and gear in general. Like there's I think it was Quad Rock. You had bottles that I was like, this looks so cool. Didn't buy them.
The Hydro Pack
Yeah, like
Speed
the
Flask
way they
bottles,
open, I was like, that sounds super practical. As soon as my bottles are broken, I'm gonna buy, and I'm probably gonna shop into that. But I haven't done gear review, and I probably should. Like, I've really been considering myself. Like, look, what shoes? Like, I'm asked I get asked all the time. Like, what shoes did you use for that? And most of the time, I'm like, I actually don't remember. Like, I just didn't pick the information. But it would make sense for me to also write to company and say, hey, like I'm running in Cocodona. Like, do you want to give me a pair of shoes? Like, I'm gonna feature them in the movie, and I'm gonna give a very honest review after 250 mile. Was it shit or not? But it takes time to write to company, and honestly, I don't know anyone, so I'm not part of the running Illuminati. Also, that's what we
That's
concluded
definitely
last week.
a struggle for the runtuber, is getting in contact with the right person
Yeah,
for that type, to get gear or whatever. It's always a struggle. Yeah, very rarely are companies actually reaching out to me for my small channel, but maybe it's because I'm not big enough.
I,
but growing.
it's like anytime someone reaches out to me, I was like, this is probably a scam. I'm not responding to that. This is very suspicious. Like, no, thank you, no, thank you.
Yeah, it is fun to do the shoe reviews. I like I said, I enjoy the races and the trail adventure runs and whatnot. I enjoy those a lot more. Like last year, I did a 40 for 40. I ran just over 40 miles in the mountains, 10,000 feet of vert. I did that for my 40th birthday month. Such a great time, fun video. I don't know, check it out. But yeah, the gear reviews, like, it's informative, and it is interesting to be able to run in a bunch of different pairs of shoes. I'm starting to do more like hydration pack reviews. And so it's interesting after a while to be able to kind of compare those a little bit. And, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, like, is this a product that I would continue to run in? Is it something I will use in a race maybe in the future? And some products, it's like they're not bad products, but there's better products that maybe I would choose to run in or whatever, shoes and whatnot. But
Yeah,
I don't know. I think I'm just starting that whole journey. I've got a whole bunch of shoes that I still need to review that I'll be sharing some videos out here pretty soon. And it's fun because I'll usually do my reviews. Well, and this kind of gets into my channel. So time management, right? Like, I had to figure out when I was going to record these videos and when I'm going to edit them too. So it worked out well for my channel name, See Chad Run, because instead of doing like B-roll where I'm out on the trails, running in whatever said gear, and then talking about it in the studio, I'm almost doing the opposite, because I'm already out on the trails. We're already out, hitting the pavement, out on these runs. I might as well bring the GoPro with me and talk about whatever product I'm reviewing. And over time, I think I've improved on that a little bit, have a little bit more of a better narrative. Sometimes I feel like I'm still stumbling, but you start where you are and you move forward and you try and improve as you move forward. So I'm already out on these runs. I might as well do a review, and that's how I do my reviews. So I'm out on the trail. Literally, you're seeing Chad run while I talk about these shoes. I talk about the build of it, the comfort, the performance, the value. I'll go over the specs. So I usually hand it off to voiceover Chad to cover the specs, and that's my little recording while I'm showing the the stats of the shoe or whatever. And yeah, and then I'll do B-roll of the shoe up close or whatever it might be, overlaid with me talking. And in the meantime, it's cool too, because if I'm out on a trail, you get to see like the area, and it changes with the seasons, and so the view is a little bit different in my format of videos and reviews than a lot of other channels, which I think is fun. Some people,
Yeah,
I've gotten a couple comments, they don't like it, but most people I think are fine with it.
and you must.
I did some homework on you, Chad, and I checked out the channel, and
Good.
And it's good stuff. It's great content. I saw like maybe the 12 months of running one, so you showed all the seasons in the same ish neighborhood or trail neighborhood area.
Yeah, just like a recap. And yeah.
And then I watched a shoe review one, and then I caught the Sunto vertical watch one, and I'm a huge Sunto user. And I actually have the Sunto vertical watch on my wrist right now. And I love mine.
I'm Garmin, guys.
But it
I'm
was odd.
sorry.
It was
You're outnumbered,
so
Simon, because
it
I'm on
was odd
Suunto
though.
now too.
It was odd after I saw your video. I was checking out Facebook, of course, just scrolling along, and somebody said, "Hey, I got a couple bucks I need to drop on a watch. What should I buy?" And of course, I chimed in. I said, "Hey, I got this Suunto Vertical. I love it." But then I thought, "Oh, let me link Chad's video
I
to
saw
it
you
because
do that.
it's." And I was
Oh,
like,
thank
"Oh, it's
you.
so simple." I was like, "It's so simple." Like, I mean, like you already did the work for me. I'm like, I don't have to sell it, and it's not even my video. I'm like, "Oh, I'll just link Chad's video." Somebody else did the review on it already. So yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I was able to use the content that I did my homework from you to somebody else's
I mean, it's good
question
stuff,
Thank you.
right?
about getting a new watch.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Like the truth is, and my response to that comment, actually, I saw it too. Like it was Kendra, and it's like first, like if anyone is willing to sponsor you, like take that brand and like just shut the fuck up. Like it's that simple. If Apple Watch would come, like by the way, Apple Watch, if you're watching, if you want me to test your Apple Watch Ultra, just give me one and like I'll make review and people will buy it. Like it's like let's face it, it's like if it's a good product, it's gonna be fine. And like my Garmin, I never had issue with it. Would the Santo be a little bit better? Well, I don't know because I only bought 2 watches
Yeah.
in my life and they're doing what they should do. But if you review things like Chad is doing, like you get the spectrum and like you get the level of subtlety to like sure, like shoes, if it doesn't fit you, it doesn't fit you. Like even if it's a good shoe, it doesn't fit you, it's not good. But at some point you need to think about like, okay, what's the right tool for the right trail and how you would like you can get to a level of subtlety. If we'd compared to wine, it's not just like, well, this is a red wine and this is a white wine and this one is good or this one is bad. It's like, well, this one would pair well with a muddy trail and this one would pair well with like that kind of like this would be more a short road, this one is a long road. And I think that's a thing that I don't have, because when I recommend shoes to people, I say just if it fits you and you don't have blister, it's a good shoe. Like
Well, and that's the struggle with shoes. Like, people ask, well, what shoe should I get? And it's like, well, the one that works well for you, the one that you like the most. I don't know, like, right? So we can have a whole different podcast about that too. But and one thing that I try to do with my videos is try to focus on an area that's uh, just a little bit different than I'm so like my shoe reviews, I do cover the specs, but I try not to focus too much on that because it's easy to be like, oh, the midsole has this technology and blah blah. But I try to focus more on the performance because I think that's what people want to get out of their shoe.
Yeah.
Like, how is this going to perform for me, right? So I try to focus on that. Maybe there's still some adjustment that I need to do on my channel. With the Suunto watch review, it was more focused not on the map features or the menu options, the technology. Like it's a high-end watch. It's going to be great from a technology perspective, right? Just like some of the Garmin's and Choruses and such. But I tried to focus on why I chose this watch, and maybe that would be meaningful to somebody else, right?
Yeah.
I managed a shoe store for 4 months. We had over 300 shoes on the wall. We only had maybe 25 running shoes on the wall. The rest were high-end female dress shoes.
Interesting. With high margins.
But I know so much about shoes, right? And so I appreciated your take on it. And I mean, I could see you did the homework, you did the specs, and you covered the specs, but you're quick and you were through it and you moved on from there. So I appreciated that. And I used to get that question all the time, that people would come in and they say, oh, you're the runner guy. What shoes do you wear? And I said, well, I wear this brand, but you should buy the shoe that works best for you. Like, don't buy the shoe that I'm wearing because it might not work for you,
Yeah, so true.
All right, Coach Brian, let's go to the coach corner. You ready for it?
All right.
All right.
Let's hear. So Coach's Corner, we got questions that came in from the internet, from across the World Wide Web. Pressing questions need to be answered, and hopefully I can do these questions some justice.
Yes. And Chad, feel free to chime in if you have an opinion about those, especially the first one, because Brian is the worst person to answer that question. So
let's hear it.
Brian, you know that I'm right though. So the question is polls or no polls? What is, or okay, I'll read the actual question, but polls or no polls? Is this just a preference deal? Any real benefit to using them? That's a question from Adam. So Adam, thanks for your question. And Brian, which is definitely biased about that, will tell you what he thinks.
So Adam, appreciate the question. We're talking about trekking poles for events. Is it just a preference deal or any real benefit to them? Yes, there's definitely, contrary to Simon's belief of my stance, there is definitely a preference to using trekking poles, using them in training, being familiar with them, being able to deploy them and put them back in your pack or stow them away efficiently is another consideration. Used properly, trekking poles can take a little bit of weight off your legs, but over time that adds up to be a lot of savings, energy savings in your lower body extremities. You can tax your upper body and still move on with that for the process. Do I use them when people, Simon and I had this conversation a couple days ago. We were talking about the Ura 100. I think I went 45 miles or so without trekking poles before I caved and finally took my trekking poles. I was planning on taking my trekking poles, but
No, no, no,
I
no.
was waiting. I was going to wait till
He's
longer.
massaging the truth. Don't listen to him. So if you're not familiar with Ura 100, and just my short take on poles is it's clearly overused in ultra running, but there's a huge benefit, and it's you have to ask yourself, do I need poles or not for this race? And typically, or whatever you're doing, and typically, if it's a longer distance with a lot of elevation, both gain and loss, I think poles are super useful, and you will not feel it at first, but the benefit will pile up. Or if you don't use them, your quads will get destroyed and you'll just get progressively tired. You need to use them in training for sure, because people also don't use them properly. Like they kind of like tippy tap with them. It's like, well, you're just carrying useless weights. You got to actually use them. And that comes with practice to just have the right technique. And like when you're pushing yourself up, there's different ways to do it, like a double or one at a time. When you're going downward, shouldn't rely too much on it, but you can alleviate a little bit of pressure. But no, so Ura 100 is 40,000 feet of gain. And Brian is like, I'm not going to use pole. I was like, dude, what the hell? Nobody does not use pole at Ura 100. It's just silly. But he was very serious about it until he was like, yeah, I'll use poles.
So to Simon, to the same point that Simon and I are both saying is that you need to use them properly, and I think that is my issue with trekking poles or seeing them so overly used in the ultra world. A lot of people are just tippy tapping; they're just keeping them out in front of them, and they're dead weight if you're not using them properly. Because we're in this format of this video where it's hard to show you how to use them properly, or you're listening and we still can't get that visual across to you. I suggest looking at cross-country ski racing and how they place their pole their arm is way out in front of them, and the bottom tip of the pole is right at their heel of their foot, and they're pushing all their momentum behind them. So they're using the pole to propel themselves forward as opposed to just tippy tapping and using it for a little bit of balance and stability. At that
like
point, they're dead weight. Yeah.
If you step too far out in front of you, you're wasting motion there. Yeah.
You got the flat tire, right?
Yeah.
You're a pole user,
I've used
right?
poles in a few. Yeah, I've used them in some races. In other races, I haven't. Kind of depends on maybe the distance, but also mostly the vert, right? So I found them effective on the really steep sections, especially if I'm starting to get tired. I'll do the double pole, method to get up a hill. And I'm waving my arms around like you can see if you're just listening to the podcast. So I'll do that to get up a hill. I found them effective to help stabilize just a little bit on downhill sections where I'm not just, full sending it, right? Where I need some stability, especially if the rocks are like super loose. You can use them to help stabilize yourself so you're not slipping in that case. But I've also used them in more flat sections later in a race where I'm just frankly tired, but I want to keep moving strong. And I'll use them, usually it's every other step, right? Depending, just to kind of get that motion.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm using it, like you said, Brian, where maybe my pole, if I'm honest, is striking in front of me, but I'm not putting any pressure on it until it's right next to my body and I'm pushing backwards, right? Just to help propel me forward so I can keep going. So I've used poles. The hard part though is how to store them. Do you carry them? Is there a good way to put them on your pack? Not all packs accommodate poles very well. I've got the pair of carbon Solomon poles, which are pretty lightweight. And for Never Summer, I ended up just carrying them the whole time. I didn't pack them.
Mhm.
I mean, they were in my hands, but light enough that I could put both of them in one hand and a GoPro in the other,
Mm.
and keep
Yeah,
going pretty easily.
the other danger with like keeping them in your hand, and like for me, that's why I try to not do it, is that you tend to eat more when your hands are free. When I have poles in my hand, I tend to just like I don't know, like it's silly. Like if I would want, like I could easily eat, but somehow it's just naturally not occurring as much. Um,
You have to think about it.
yeah,
Yeah,
but then I think the
yeah.
advantage when
Eating
you're
was very
filming is
purposeful with
that you're gonna
poles.
do it anyway. So like I need to put my poles away and like film with one hand, and then I put my camera away and say, oh, like it's time to eat again, and like it kind of corrects itself a little bit by filming, but
Mhm.
otherwise you get
Yeah.
trapped in that. And people have to be aware also, like at the start, it's so like Leadville is a nightmare. You're gonna get poked. Like there's 400 people swing their poles everywhere, and like we're all packed, and you're on a flat road. You don't need your poles right now. Like I don't know why people would have them, but I think
Yeah.
you look more like a pro
Eh,
runner when you have poles. Also, I think there's a little bit of that. Like
It's good for B-roll footage. It's
that.
good for B-roll footage.
It's
Yeah,
very
that
good
too.
for
No,
that.
and never summer, I just held them, vertically at the start, knowing that there were so many people around, and then I didn't use them until there was a good climb after about 2 miles. So pulled them out there at that point, and actually used them. But
Yeah,
by then it was a little more spread out, of course, too.
yeah.
Well, I hope that answers your question, Adam. We appreciate that question.
Yep. Next question, Brian. Coach Brian. So I'm running 100K in May. I guess the May doesn't necessarily matter, but I'm gonna run 100K. What should be my longest run ahead of the race? Question by Tom B.
Thanks
It's a
for the
good
question,
question.
Tom. Tom, there is no magic number. There, consistency, fitness, back-to-back runs, getting comfortable being uncomfortable. There is no magic number, really. I can't say that we're using your 100K, but to apply that to all the different distances, I can't say that your long run should be 80% or 70%. I can't put a target number on it for you.
Ryan,
The
I think
long run.
consistency is key there, like more important
Mhm.
than the biggest long run. But there's probably benefit to consistently getting a long run in
Hmm.
roughly each week. You can tell me if you disagree with that, but
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a week or every 5 days or whatever your little microcycle is or macrocycle is. But yeah, definitely long runs are needed. Don't get me wrong. To run 100 kilometers, 62 miles is a long distance. Consistency is key. I think we get this question a lot, and I think people weigh their long run as the end game. Like if I can do the long run, if I could do the 42 miles that Coach Brian said to do, then I'm going to be able to do the 100 kilometer that he said I'm going to be able to do in 4 weeks time afterwards. And it doesn't work that way at all. There is no, the 42 was a completely arbitrary number. So don't use that number, Tom.
although Brian, I will say when I did my 40 for 40, that was 3 weeks before Never Summer. I ran 43 miles. Mentally, that prepared me. I will say that because I knew how I felt during that 43-mile run, and I was tired. It was a hard run, but I knew that I was like, okay, if I can do this, then I'm pretty sure I'll be successful at the 65 mile or the 100K for that race. However, physically, I probably didn't need the extra 15 miles or even the time on feet. It didn't make me more fit. It maybe just prepared me
Mhm.
mentally a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's hard to put the like a minimum amount, but if Tom would say, because in my training plan right now, my longest run is 3 miles. I think we would all react saying like, look, that's not enough. Like that's not enough. Like there's definitely like a range, and like okay, like if you ran 19 as your highest instead of 20, is it a big difference? Not really. And for me, there's also kind of a ceiling of it's good to have a like before 100K. I really recommend doing a 50-mile race at some point. I wouldn't consider that part of the training block, but getting used to like racing, to fueling, to feeling bad. But I don't think it's a productive workout. I wouldn't recommend running 50 miles as part of your training block. But hey, like 8 weeks out or like the year before you run a 50-mile, that's good. Like don't go from I ran a 5K and my next race is 100K. I think that's like stupid. Some people will do it and some people will succeed, but that's also a recipe for disaster. And then in training myself, I would never run more than 30 miles as like a training run, because I feel it's getting to the point where you're testing things like fueling, you're testing things like being uncomfortable, how will I shave, and these sorts of things. But physically, fitness wise, for myself at least, I will be banged up after that, and then I need proper healing after that, which kind of impairs the whole kind of training block. So myself, I would say like between 20 and 30 is like probably good enough, and that would be true for a 100-mile also. That might not be true for a 200-mile, or I mean that's what I'm gonna do, and I will see if that will work or not. But yeah.
So it might give you
Totally.
good experience and good mental preparedness. It allows you to play with fueling and whatnot on a tired, upset stomach or whatever it might be. But that's probably about the only benefit,
Yeah.
right?
I do see your point, Chad, about the mental benefit, but I think that is also, and it gives you that boost. But I also think there's believing in the process has to be there as well, and kind of trusting in the training, and showing up fresh,
Yeah.
more fresh that you may have been in your circumstance, in your scenario that you dictated. I also think the question stems from years and years of like marathon training. We know marathon's pretty standard, 26.2 miles, and every marathon book, even the one on my shelf behind me, had some sort of long run between 18 and 20 miles, 4 weeks out. And it was like, that was the goal. And like, if you did that, then you could just coast. You could put on the coasters and you were going to finish this marathon. Right. And I don't think at ultra running, we have that same scenario.
Honestly, even that for me, like that's not like when I was saying like pseudoscience a little bit. It's like it's common knowledge that you do that because everyone is doing that and everyone's recommending that. But like when you dig, it's probably not the case. And yeah, I heard I think 70% of your target mileage for the race should be your longest run. And yeah, maybe that works for a marathon, but like you think like Cocodona 250, like am I really gonna run like 180 miles a training run? Like that's just ridiculous. Like it doesn't scale.
Or even a 70 miler of your 100.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't scale at some point. At smaller distance, probably like, you run a 5K as a race, like, yeah, maybe you can run like a 3K, but at some point, I mean, yeah, doing 100 miles a training run is just, some people say that online. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever, but that's a whole different story.
But if you want to get out and put in some extra miles, like by all means do it, right? Like I'm going to plan on running a 56-mile big old loop here, and I'll do that. I'm going to say it's part of my training. It's really just because I want to go explore and say I did it and do something different. And it'll give me some training, right, for my 100-mile race.
And it would be the equivalent of if you would go and like run a 50-mile, like that's like, I'm not against doing these things at all. But the warning though, and like I think that was kind of Brian's point, like it's good to put like a good time buffer between like that big ass run and your actual race.
You don't want to get injured.
Yeah.
8 weeks typically, 10 weeks is better. Simon's good with 3 weeks usually between them.
Yeah, well, but I underperform chronically. That's something to remember, and like I think people don't understand that.
Chronic.
Well, seriously, like I really underperform compared to what I know I could do if I was well rested with a full training block. Like because I always do that, then it sounds like that's kind of my normal performance level. But I know from races that were before my YouTube career that like there's a huge difference between what I do right now, racing all the time, and what I could do with proper training and rest. And it's a difference of 3-4 hours for a 100-mile, which I can still finish, but it's significantly slower. And it's because I'm not fully rested. Like I feel good, but I know that there is a difference between feeling good and being 100%.
So Tom, I think you could surmise from our conversation that maybe 8 weeks out, a 50K or a 50 miler might be manageable. I don't know where you're at in the world, and that might be tough to do before May, seeing as though that is 2 months away. And I don't know if it's early May or late May.
He has to do it tomorrow.
So
put your shoes. Stop making excuses.
Good luck, Tom.
Yeah.
But I also say that there is no magic
No.
number. I think Simon kind of nailed it, and it's the same system that I use. We usually run 20 to 24 miles at the most in training runs leading up to an event, and you could probably do that up to 3 weeks to 4 weeks out from your big event, and then start the downhill trajectory taper to your event. Just kind of nail that. Make sure you hit that and get to your event fresh. And best of luck, Tom.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, Chad. It was great to meet you, and great to hear all about your show and all your adventures. And we wish you the best of luck on the Ute 100 here later this year.
UTE
Oh,
or
yeah, thank you so
Ute?
much.
We're not sure.
I don't know if I nailed that once yet, but
It's probably Ute 100. I'm looking forward to the race. I'm looking forward to the experience. Like we said earlier, my first 100-miler. I think I'm going to enjoy it, and it's going to be hard and painful at times, but it's going to be a blast, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'll have a video on my channel after that, shortly after the race, so everybody can look forward to that, see what my experience was, and yeah, just getting out there and enjoying every mile. Like I say in my video, all my videos, getting out there and enjoying every mile. So,
Chad, where can we find you at? Where's we mentioned the channel, but maybe give everything a plug one last time. And
yeah, of course, on YouTube, if you just search See Chad Run, so SEE Chad Run, you'll find me there. And of course, I'm on Instagram, Facebook as well, and links on the YouTube channel. You can get to my other socials from there.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. Have a great evening. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.